Do you struggle with negative thoughts that seem to run on autopilot, sometimes even in the middle of the night? In this video, I'm going to show you how to start changing your negative thinking by changing one persistent negative thought. Hi, I'm Lori Bonaparte. I'm a certified life coach, and I guide people to find clarity and direction to move forward and get the life they want. Before we get into it, I suggest you have your high-tech tools on hand, paper, maybe even a Post-it note to take notes and also write out your thoughts and your feelings. Once you get them out of your head and onto paper, it makes it much easier to go through the process. Let's start by clarifying the two categories that negative thoughts typically fall into. One is the past. The other is the future. What I mean by that is that thoughts of the past are usually about reviewing and ruminating about things that have already happened. Thoughts of the future are about typically worry or anxiety of what could or might happen. Our problem thinking arises when we get into a negative thought rut, and it's typically because there are thoughts and there are emotions that are mixed. And sometimes the emotions are not really split out and identified, and there just becomes a gray area between emotion and thought. For example, if we're thinking about a past negative thought, something that had to do with our past, now that we've added emotion, there's research that shows that we actually even change how the memory is held for us. So one of the important things that we need to do is split out what is the emotion. If we're taking a look at a negative thought that has to do with the future, that emotion is pretty clear. If it's a negative thought, which is usually worry, the base emotion of that is fear and anxiety. So typically, that's what the emotion is that's attached to a future negative thought. Okay, here's where your high-tech tools come in. Get your paper and a pen in front of you and think of just one persistent negative thought that you'd like to change and write it down. If you need to pause the video, hit pause, write down your thought, hit play. You want to finish this process. Are you ready for step one? Step one is identify one persistent negative thought and write it down on those high-tech tools that I asked you to get in front of you. If you need to hit pause to do it, go ahead and do so now. Hit pause, write out that only one thought that keeps happening again and again for you that you'd like to change. And now ask yourself, is it a thought about the past or a thought about the future? Is it a thought about yourself, or is it a thought about others or someone else in particular? Before we go any further, if you'd like to see more thought-provoking videos like this in your newsfeed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Step two is to identify the emotions that you have within that thought. And I'm going to give you some common examples of emotions that go with thoughts to kind of help you get to the answer a little quicker. If your persistent negative thought has to do with your past and it has to do with yourself, some of the common emotions that are attached to that are blame, shame, regret, and guilt. A lot of that is your inner critic that is going through those emotions. The antidote to that is to forgive yourself. You're not the same person you were in the past. And I'm guessing if you had to do that situation again, you'd do it differently moving forward. So forgive yourself, forgive your younger self, forgive your past self. You're a different person now. If your negative persistent thought is a past thought that has to do with others, the emotions attached to that are possibly hurt, sadness, anger, and possibly even fear. You might want to ask yourself if there's forgiveness that you need to extend to someone else. If your negative persistent thought is about the future, the most common emotion under that is fear and or anxiety. Thoughts of the future that are negative are really called worry. If you're having a negative thought about the future that has to do with yourself, one of the questions you can ask yourself is, what can I control in this situation? If your negative persistent thought is about the future and has to do with someone else or others, again, the underlying emotion is fear. And I have some news that might not be comfortable for you, and that is you have no control. However, the good news is you have influence. We can't control others, and there's room to influence them. So once you identify what the fear is, you can go about addressing it. You can ask yourself, what can I influence in this situation? So to review, we talked about step 1, which is identify the thought. We talked about step 2, which is identify the emotion within the thought. Step 3 is to identify an action step that's within your control. And it could be a little baby step. Step 4, and yes, this is a separate step, is to decide an action step to take, even if it's a baby step. And by the way, thinking a new thought, having a new perspective is considered an action step. Step 5, if you haven't already done so, it's time to choose a new thought that you want to replace that old negative thought with. If you have a persistent negative thought that you no longer want to think, you're going to need to replace it with a better positive thought. Otherwise, your brain will go back to that other thought pattern that you had going. So now's the time to intentionally choose, what do you want to replace that old thought with? What is the new positive thought that you'd like to think? If you've gone through this process, I'd really love to know how it was for you. Let me know in the comments below. I read each and every one. And if you'd like to be guided through more thought processes similar to this one, check out the link in the description below. See you next time.